definitely watches Called a Midwife, and currently is kind of revisiting Downton Abbey.
Oh yeah,
in recent weeks. So
swanky. So welcome back, everyone, to the. What are we doing, Tom? What is this?
Almost perfect podcast.
It's a podcast, and it's almost perfect. It's been so long, I had forgotten, man.
Yeah. We've just been talking about how we've been hit and miss lately with. For those who are actually committed to actually seeing us on occasion, we'll try to be much better in the upcoming days and months.
Hopefully so. And, speaking of those people, shout out to John from the UK. John reached out to me, somehow found the podcast on YouTube and started listening and said he liked it. Whoa.
Yeah.
So maybe should we do like a segment in our best English accent?
I think I would be better off in Spanish, and I'm not going to say I'm great at that either. So
my wife and I like to watch Call the Midwife, and there's some times when the people are speaking, I'm like, and she'll do the same thing. Like, what did they just say? What?
We always use captions on.
Yeah.
There's a Canadian. What is it? Murdoch mysteries that we like to watch, and then Ellen definitely watches Called a Midwife, and currently is kind of revisiting Downton Abbey. In recent weeks. So
swanky.
Yeah. So I'm, first of all, I'm older. A little older than John, and I know it's hard to tell. I look so young.
It is, yeah.
I'm not fooling myself, but I'm at that age where captions really do help, no matter what.
Captions
language.
Forever, man. Because I've always had it. Sometimes I would be half paying attention, but the captions would help. And then sometimes, like, what? I just couldn't make out what people are saying. And so we've had the captions for a long time. So
I don't know.
Anyway.
I don't know how well it'd go over, but maybe a movie theater that included captions in the movies, because you mentioned the Marvel movies, and I'm going, I know exactly what you're talking about, because Ed, my friend from Wisconsin who lives here in Corpus now, he and I would catch all of the latest Marvel movies in the theaters, and I go, man, I miss those captions. And with Marvel, with their banter, it's almost like you miss a lot if you don't catch their banter.
Sure, yeah. So it is helpful. Speaking of that, Tom's talking about a sermon reference yesterday. I got in trouble when I got home. One of my girls said, "Dad, you messed up," because I asked the question, "Do you have a favorite Marvel movie?" And I said Iron Man or Wonder Woman or whatever. I know Wonder Woman isn't a Marvel film, so I tried to convince her. She didn't believe me, because I was talking about getting attention, right?
Yeah.
That I was talking about getting attention, trying to get your attention. That I spoke out of turn. That Wonder Woman is a Marvel movie. She didn't buy it, but we'll leave that to the history of Christians preaching, and whether future generations will pick that up or not. I don't know.
Yeah.
So anyway, it has been a few weeks since we've been together. Just a reminder, I'm John. That's Tom, Wade, and Brad. Haven't heard from him in a while. Of course, we all know Wade's getting ready to move. He's going to be moving out of Corpus Christi. Brad's been traveling the world. Where's the farthest you've been in the last month or so, Tom?
Across the bridge. No, in the last month, I probably Port A is the farthest I've been. Now, broaden that to, how far have I been? How far away have I lived from Corpus Christi? That changes a lot.
A little bit. Well, Brad's been in Romania. I know Wade's been doing some campus visits, right? I went to Walmart the other day. So
West Virginia. He went to West Virginia.
That's right. So
how far is the farthest you've been?
Lately, not very far at all. Not very far. Yeah. And then even just in general, I mean, I haven't been out of the country. I've been to Mexico.
Recently?
Not recently. That's probably been That's probably been 6 years ago since I've been that far. Other than that, yeah, just vacation, Nashville or Colorado. That's about as far as I've gone. So anyway,
Yeah.
So we're back, and Tom had an interesting idea.
Yeah, and this is actually based on a conversation I had. You see the baseballs in back, and we were just reviewing our very first podcast, and of course, the baseballs were behind me, but they were in my office at Asbury here in Corpus Christi, and now they're in my bedroom. I regularly go to the baseball games at Whataburger Field, and this is less than 2 weeks ago. Someone asked me to pray for his situation, and he said, "I know we're not the same religion." He's Catholic, but we have the same God, and that led to a conversation with my friend saying, "Well, we're not as far as you think apart." And part of that is just, historically. So, I said, in this case, United Methodists are closer to Catholics than we are to, say, Lutherans or Baptists. And he was surprised at that comment. Now,
that comment will shock a lot of people, Tom.
John, why do you think I would have said that?
I don't know, Tom. That sounds weird to me.
Yeah, it does sound weird, doesn't it?
We don't have incense or fathers or things like that in the United Methodist churches. Hey, before we get into that though, can I ask you another question?
Yeah, sure.
How does one get to a point where they are praying for somebody at a baseball game?
Oh, it was, actually, I've been going to the games for 6 seasons now, and been 5 seasons, because there was no season a couple of years ago, but for 5 seasons. And I'm what do you call it? Season ticket holder, and have been for 4 of the 5 seasons. Anyway, so I've gotten to know a lot of folks, and one of the things I do is, I'll have conversation with some of the players on both teams, but I also make a circuit, and I've gotten to know the folks around that circuit, and in those conversations, we've talked about some things that are going on in our lives, and because of that, there's been the invitation to pray for a daughter-in-law who was having brain surgery, someone who's having physical problems, just different things. So that's what happens, because I have regular conversations, and I pretty much, do a circuit and have conversation, and because my friends know that, first of all, I'm a pastor. They now know I'm a retired pastor, because I actually stay out late on Saturday nights. So, but that's how that happens, is developing relationships with people on an ongoing basis. It's certainly seasonal. It's April to September relationships. Very few of those people have I seen outside of the baseball park. So
I think that's awesome, though, because I think it's something we talk about a lot, that, it's programs, ministries, they all have their place, sure. But that right there just reminds me of what's so important about our witness, right? That you can be in a place like a baseball stadium, and because you've made those connections, you just open up doors like that. And we don't know how those times or moments of prayer may be a blessing to people, right? And so this is a great reminder. I thought that was great. If you've ever seen a preacher, before the service starts on a Sunday morning at church, walking around greeting everybody, that's Tom at Whataburger Field. He's going around saying hello to everybody. And I think that's awesome. That's a great deal. All right. So Methodists are closer to Catholics than they are to Lutherans. Is that what you said?
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's exactly what I said.
So that sounds shocking, but why isn't it shocking?
Well, one of the things is we are looked at as a part of the Protestant. We're a Protestant church, but one of the things, and it's interesting because if you're not Catholic, you're Protestant, correct? I mean, that's the thinking. But I think we're actually, that would be a misnomer for us historically, because Lutherans were a part of the Protestant movement. That it was Luther who protested and put up the 95 90. No, it's not 99, but yeah,
sorry, that's
a reminder, we're Wesleyan, we're not Lutheran.
Right. 99 problems, but no, that's something else. That's a different thing. Never mind.
But
95, I think you're right.
Our history is tied to the Catholic Church, the Anglican Church, and then Methodist Church. And the disagreement between the Anglican Church, which is very similar, and which would also be in the United States, the Episcopal Church, is this: the disagreement was purely political, not theological. Sure. It's it was the king saying, I want to get rid of this wife and marry this wife, and the Pope saying, no, you can't, and the king saying, well, then we'll break off from you, and we'll do all the things we've always done, but we'll now put an Anglican spin on it, and so that was the first break. And I kind of say, well, that if for the Anglican Church, the Catholic Church is mother, daughter. Mm-hmm. And then for us, it wasn't so much a disagreement theologically with the Anglican Church as it was practically. It's and here's the practical thing. We were going through a Revolutionary War, and it was best to break ties on this side of the pond with everything English. And so so that's part of it. And then practically is Methodists were more willing to go into, go outside and preach. That was, that wasn't original with John Wesley, but it was something that John Wesley did and was frowned upon by the Anglican Church. And John Wesley was in England. He was always Anglican. It's Francis Asbury and Thomas Coke on this side that really organized Methodism. And Methodism is a U.S. product.
That's always the line. That's always the line, right? Wesley never intended to create a new church, right?
Nope, a new denomination.
New denomination. His desire was just to connect people to the church. And for him, the church, like you're saying, is the Anglican Church. Yeah. But once it got over here, this idea of, well, the English, we're trying to separate from them completely. And so it made sense to do that as far as a church movement as well. So the Methodist has always been a movement. Before it was a denomination, before it was a church, it was a movement. So a lot of times when we get to that, if we do the liturgy for communion, or the confession of the affirmation of faith, right? We get to that line where, we believe in the Holy Catholic Church. And a lot of times people get nervous because they're, wait a minute, I thought we weren't Catholics. We always talk about, well, the little C or the big C, blah, blah, blah. Universal, right? The little asterisk in the hymnal tells us universal. So we're kind of uncomfortable, a lot of us sometimes, kind of making that connection between, Catholic and Methodist. But like you're telling us, I mean, we're sisters and brothers still. We're still the same faith, but we have different practices. And certainly we have different understandings of different points of theology. But does that make us a different religion?
Right. Well, and I want to come back to something that's significant, both it's definitely front and center for Catholics, and that's Mass. Mm-hmm. For us, we would call it communion, but and both within the Catholic Church and within the United Methodist Church, that is a significant sacrament that we attend to regularly. In fact, it's a little surprising that we don't do it on a weekly basis, like and some United Methodist churches do. But we in United Methodist, in United Methodism, we come to communion on a regular basis. And again, it's not so much as a theological as much as it is a historical practice that within within Methodism, we tend to have communion on the first Sunday of the month. And why do we do that? Is it a theological reason? No, it actually comes from our history, because we were such an out there moving movement that the ordained pastor who has to oversee communion only showed up about once every 4 to 6 weeks. They did a circuit, and when they came, that's when Methodists had communion. And so now we've continued that practice, even though we could actually do it every week, because our ordained pastors are typically in the pulpit every Sunday. So
yeah, before we were itinerant, but we itinerated circuits. So
yeah,
I would have a circuit of churches, right? Say, for example, the 7 United Methodist churches here in Corpus Christi, they'd be on my circuit, and they'd be probably more spread out, of course. And then when it was time for me to move, I didn't move from church to church. I just moved a different circuit. But like you're saying, we kept that practice of not sporadic communion, but not every time we gather communion.
Yeah.
So, and I've heard this before, we talk about, well, they're a different church. That means they're a different religion. But part of that conversation that you were having is, no, we're not. Different religion is us and Buddhist, right? That is a distinct religion, as are many other religions. But within the umbrella of Christianity, I mean, it's all the same. And so what is that? How does that help us realizing that? How does that open up our eyes to see what is significant about making sure we understand that?
Well, one of the things that's, and like my friend said, we serve the same God, and it's interesting to note, when we talk about different religions, there is an actual, not just simply we see God differently, we see a different God. Yeah, it's important to recognize that. I'm not informed enough to make comments about any of the other major religions, whether we're talking about Buddhism, Islam, Judaism. Again, like Catholics are the mother that birthed the Anglican Church, and the grandmother of the Wesleyan movement, the Methodist Church. We do flow out of the same stream as Jewish believers. Where we branch off is our view of who Jesus Christ is, and certainly that's not true for all Jews. But the mainstream Judaism does not acknowledge that Jesus is who we as Christians say he is. But anyway, coming back is this idea, though, we within the context of a religion, it's how we see God and how we serve God. And Catholicism, Baptists, Lutherans, Methodists, we do serve the same God, the God of the scriptures, the Old and New Testament, the Hebrew and Christian scriptures. So that's a religion. And then there's branches off that become denominations. And it's interesting. I don't know that I don't call the Catholic Church a denomination.
I don't know if I ever have either.
the denominations kind of split off, all those little branches that came off of either directly or indirectly off the Catholic Church.
Have you seen there's a cartoon online, it's several years old, little strip, it's somebody teaching a Bible class and doing sort of the history of the Christian movement, and, Catholic Church and branches off here, and then, Protestant church and all the branches, and it just kind of funnels down, and then he's pointing and says, here we are, and aren't you glad we finally got it figured out, right? That's us, that little point right there. So yeah, so much of Christian history seems is learning how we've dealt with, good or bad, with our differences of opinion, whether that's opinions on theology or even certain practices of faith, right? And just like King decided, well, you're not going to let me do what I want with my wife. Well, then I'm just going to go to a new church. I mean, Christians still do that. Oh, you're not going to let me do this church? Well, I'll go start a new church, right? It's just, there's something in us, I guess, that just leads us that way, where it feels like it's a lot easier to do that. So anyway, yeah, I'm hopeful that we see each other in this way, in a better light, because you hear stories a lot from some of the old timers around where if you were Catholic, you looked down on the Protestants, the Hallelujahs. If you were Protestant, you were called the Hallelujahs, and you look down on the Catholics, and that's unfortunate because we serve the same God, right?
Yeah.
And there's much about the Catholic Church and the liturgy and everything that I so much appreciate when I have a chance, to go to a Catholic church, whether it's a funeral or something like that. I'm there, and depending on the church, right? When you get to the issue of communion, some Catholic churches make a hard line that if you're not Catholic, you can't have communion. But even if you're not, if you want to come forward to receive a blessing, and I remember being with somebody who wasn't Catholic, and I went forward. I get the blessings. So, well, why would you do that? They're Catholic. Look, if somebody, especially somebody from the faith that we share, as much as we share, if they're willing to give me a blessing, why wouldn't I want to receive that? Right? Why? Yeah. Just because they have a different understanding of worship or whatever else? It's silly. So, trying to find what someone from the Catholic Church, what someone from the Lutheran Church, what someone from the Baptist tradition, what they can help me understand about my faith in God, and hopefully what I can help them understand that maybe they don't always think about as well. And to me, that's part of the reason why I decided to be a part of the United Methodist Church. We talk about a theological task in our documents, and that theological task always seemed to me to make room for us to kind of have more open conversations where, I mean, there's some things that we have convictions about, but there's many other things where we're like, what is it? What's the line? Think and let think. Let's talk about it. Let's, we can have conversations and even disagree, and that's okay. For me, it always felt like the Wesleyan way of faith opened up that kind of thinking, that we could be open to entertaining different ideas just for the sake even sometimes of entertaining ideas, right? I may not believe you, I may think you're crazy, but I love you enough, I'm going to listen to you, right? I mean,
well, and that's kind of the key thing is and I like this, I remember when I was serving churches up in Wisconsin, the bishop used the term, let's stay at the table, and the meaning being simply, let's continue the discussion. Let's don't leave the room in a huff. Let's stay and let's have a conversation. Because and there is a point, and it's interesting because right now, even as we talk, there has been a new branch of the Methodist Church that has been moving to a point of separation, and that point of separation, what's today? Today's the 2nd. It happened yesterday. May 1st, the global Methodist Church was, I guess, officially birthed, which I know some about, and actually am very familiar with several of the key leaders in that movement. But I'm retired. It's interesting. I'm retired, and I am thankful I'm retired, because I don't want to have to take a church through that process of, is this who we are? Is this who we are? It's one thing for me to make those decisions individually and personally. It's another thing to have the weight of that process and leading through that conversation. So, but one of the things I would say about this separation is that it isn't a sudden we're angry and we're going to leave off in a huff. It's been decades in the formation of this particular decision. How it will look, in a few years, who knows? But I know that has happened within the ranks of the United Methodist Church, and who knows if that title will survive the decade.
Sure.
The United Methodist Church.
Well, and then even people, before all this, those of us who were in the United Methodist Church, I know a lot of people who it was surprising to find out that there were other Methodist, like particularly Methodist denominations, right? Oh, wait a minute.
That already exist. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought everybody was United Methodist. No, that's a branch in and of itself, right? There are Methodists all over the world who don't call themselves United Methodists, but they're Methodists because it's a larger umbrella of a full movement. And how what's happening, what you're talking about, what's happening now, it's just another example of that, right?
Well,
and that doesn't make us totally separate from them. It's just this is how it happens. Go ahead.
Yeah, and an example of that is the Wesleyan Church, which my wife grew up in. It at one point was the Wesleyan Methodist Church, but they dropped the Methodist so that it wouldn't be confused at all with the United Methodist. Free Methodists. That's an interesting, and I really became familiar with these because I was at Asbury Theological Seminary in Wilmore, Kentucky, where the largest percentage of students were United Methodists, but there were Nazarene, there were Free Methodists, there were Wesleyans who attended that. And that's when I became familiar with all of these things, especially Wesleyan, because I began to date my wife. So
you get real interested.
I got
real. The girl gets involved. Huh?
Yeah. But yeah, the Nazarene Church, we have a Nazarene church here in fact, we have a Free Methodist church here in Corpus, and both of them are kind of smaller. Few people know they even exist, but they are here and present. And both of those are Wesleyan. Free Methodist, I think, really comes down to almost Civil War days, and not just about freedom and all that, but it didn't cost you to sit in your pew, so it was free.
You got to pay to sit, right?
Yeah.
Some other places. Yeah, very good. Yeah, and so the Wesleyan umbrella, I try to include that, like in our teaching here and there. It's not just Methodist. The Wesleyan umbrella is wide, and so people don't realize that. You mentioned the Nazarenes. Well, that's part of the Methodist movement, Assemblies of God, right?
Oh yeah, I was thinking that too.
Yeah, and these are all
which would have also moved to the Pentecostals,
right? So it's just a large way again, and all this is just to remind ourselves that, golly, we aren't as different as we fight like we are. And, and somebody told me once, all these things that we fight about, they probably mean more to us than they mean to God, and I'm hopeful that that's true. that if we can learn to get over ourselves sometimes, maybe we wouldn't have so much that we let divide us. But here we are to make sense of where we are in our churches, at least to understand where we are and how that can be helpful. So what else? What else would you have told that person at the ballpark and when you surprised them about, you serve the same God? What else would you have wanted to have a chance to tell them?
Well, in our conversation, really, it's amazing how Mass / communion, we both have very strong a strong sense of the importance of that part of worship, and kind of coming back to as you were speaking, I can remember being in a place where as a United Methodist and a known non-Catholic, I was still welcome at the table, and listening to the liturgy. And that liturgy, for those who don't know, is simply that part of the service where you may be reading prayers. That's liturgy. You may be reading and responding to a certain set of questions. That's liturgy. And within the context of Mass, listening to Mass, there were things that we as United Methodists must have directly taken out of the Catholic Church, because it is almost word for word the same as the words that you spoke yesterday over our time of preparing to receive the elements. And there's certainly how we view what happens at communion or Mass is very different. That and that's a theological difference. But as far as if you're going to come to communion, you need to confess, and we read a liturgical response or common prayer of confession together, and the Catholics would do something similar. And then there's also praying over the specific elements, the bread and the cup. And I say cup because we don't use wine; we use grape juice. We use baby wine before it grows up and matures.
Well, and even like when my kids were younger, we went to a Lutheran church. We had a strong connection with it was a smaller town, a strong connection with the Lutheran church. And so we do events with them. And for whatever reason, we were at this worship service and took communion, and my kids took communion. I never forget, they're like, "That's wine, Dad, that's wine." So it freaked them out. But there again was another time, we worshiped together in a Lutheran church. And it was, I even preached at a Lutheran church, had the Lutheran minister come preach at our church, right? And as far as I know, I don't know if anybody's listening, maybe I shouldn't say it in case I get somebody in trouble. I am the only Protestant pastor who has preached a sermon in the Catholic Church in a small town here in Texas that I'll just leave nameless for now. I don't want to ruffle any feathers, but we had a funeral, and the funeral was for a younger man who was well loved, and we couldn't host the funeral at our church. The only church big enough that we could guess that would be able to bring everybody in was the Catholic Church. And so they had to have, a few meetings. Can we let this big-headed guy come in and do that? And they did. They allowed us, which I always I received as a reminder, right? That exactly what we're talking about, that we are a family of God, and we have our distinctions, and they are what they are.
Yeah.
But there is something more powerful that unites us beyond just our, what we say we agree about certain things or practices. So anyway. All right, Tom, what else? Final thoughts about what it means to be United Methodist in comparison to maybe other faith traditions, or how we should get along anyway.
Well, and it comes down to, in my mind, the question of what do you do with Jesus? Denominationally, theologically, personally, what is your view of Jesus? How do you respond to his call, which is on every life? I mean, every life. If he is truly the Son of God, the resurrected Messiah, the bringer of salvation, the one who offers forgiveness through his name, if he's all of those things, then he's not just my Lord, he is the Lord. But I personally may say, well, that's good for you to believe, and it's not for me, and all of that. And again, that's the distinctive, is within the Catholic Church, do they honor the person of Jesus Christ and call him Lord? And the answer to that theologically is yes. In the Baptist Church, do they call Jesus Lord? Yes. In the Methodist Church, do we call Jesus Lord? Yes. In the Mormon Church, no. Right. So that's the distinctive.
Yeah. Very good. And that is what helps us understand, denomination versus another religion, or versus, a different realm of practice and understanding that is different than what we are. Those are distinctions. Those are important distinctions. So hopefully that's helpful. I love thinking about, we have a Baptist church across the street, and we talk sometimes about doing stuff together. I hear, there have been times where we've done stuff together, and those are the kinds of opportunities I like to foster and kind of make happen when I'm able to. And I think those kinds of times of unity speak a lot to our witness, and says a lot to the rest of the world who's always watching. So the more we can be in unity, either in worship or service or something, I think says a lot about what it means to call Christ Lord. So look for those moments, participate in them, create them, pray for them, all that stuff, and let them be everything they need to be for the watching world. Amen, Tom.
Amen.
All right. Well, Tom, it's good to see you again, even though I saw you yesterday. But it's good to see you in this format. Good to have a conversation with you. Hopefully those other two guys can land, and we can have them join in. And
one of these days.
One of these days. But until then, thanks for tuning in, whether you're here in Corpus Christi or somewhere else in this beautiful state called Texas, or in the nation, or if you're even in the UK. John, shout out to you, man. Glad you found us. Glad we can have a conversation together. Have a great rest of the week, everybody. We'll see you next week, and God be with you.
Thanks, John.